BTC. First off, I find it painfully obvious that fair game, or something like it, is alive and well to this day. However, the church claims that it was canceled as early as 1968. Hubbard apologists would take the position that any fair game practiced today is Captain Dave's doing and can be in no way charged to Hubbard, while critics claim that Hubbard did not cancel fair game itself, but that he canceled only use of the term for PR reasons. To your knowledge, was the practice and/or terminology in use after 1968, or did they rebrand the harassment of persons non grata? As recently as in the Monique Rathman lawsuit, the church defended harassment as a religious practice that should be, as they claimed, outside of the purview of U.S. law. Were they defending their right to fair game or something else entirely? Well, as you said, it's pretty obvious that the church still engages in fair game harassment and stalking and, do anything that they feel that they need to in order to silence critics that they have targeted for whatever reason they've targeted them. Now, with all of the bad PR that has been generated, especially in the last 10 years, they have had to tone that down quite a bit compared to what they used to get away with in the 1970s and 80s. And even into the 90s, right? So it's a whole different world now in regards to what the church does now versus what they used to do. Yes, they do still harass people, they do stalk people, they do make hate websites about them, they, stalk them around on Twitters, and this kind of stuff. But that's nothing compared to what Paulette Cooper had to endure, for example, through the 1970s with Operation Freakout, which is the subject of Tony Ortega's book. And, that was hardcore infiltration of her life, trying to get her to commit suicide, trying to frame her for, a bomb threat on the church, which the church itself manufactured. I mean, really nasty stuff. Is the church still capable of doing that? Of course they are. Would they do that kind of thing now? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how far they'd be willing to go now. I think it would depend on the target. And I think it would depend on how much damage was being done to the church as to how far they'd be willing to go. So, is this practice still in use, though? Well, as you said in the question itself, absolutely it is. That was the whole subject of Monique Rathman's lawsuit against the church. So, do they call it fair game? No, they probably don't, right? I never heard that term used in all the years that I was in Scientology for an operation being carried out against somebody else. We never ever used it as part of the lingo of, oh, he's getting fair gamed, or we're going to fair game him or something, right? So it had, at least internally in the circles I ran in, and I ran in a few of them, that term was not in use. I think when Hubbard canceled that back in '68, then internally they stopped using that. But that didn't mean that they stopped doing it. Right, and the evidence of that is numerous, repeated testimonials from people in and out of court as to how they were harassed and stalked and fair gamed, right? So the use of the term is pretty much, from what I've seen, used by critics, right? It's used by people who have been the target of that, and they correctly call it fair gaming because it's exactly what Hubbard said to do. But the church, may or may not call it that, but really we're just talking semantics now. We're not talking about the actual what they do. And as far as their defense of it in Monique Rathman's case, I can't be totally sure about this, but I believe they were arguing on free speech merits. That, people who were standing outside the Rathmans' home shouting in at them and standing around out there and just the squirrel buster signs and the various things they were doing was all a matter of First Amendment free speech, right? And anybody can do that anytime, anywhere they want, as long as they're on public property. You can't go onto private property and do that sort of thing, of course. You can't climb fences and go into a private apartment complex and do that to somebody. But if you're standing on a public sidewalk outside their house, you can picket, you could, shout whatever you wanted to. You could do, if you were following the law, you could make, whatever level of noise you could make before the police were called out. So there's a lot of freedom of speech that we have in this country, that people are given the right to express themselves. And we like that right, and we want to have that right, but we don't want to have people stalking and harassing people either. So there's a line that needs to be drawn there, and that line is supposed to be drawn by the courts. And that's what that suit was all about, but we didn't get a chance to see where that was going to go because Marty Rathbun pulled the plug on that. So that's what I can say about that whole subject.